one withdrawal, then another. Money slipping away, thousands at a time. And whenever I asked about it, his attitude turned colder, sharper. Then I found a message that cut deep. That fool believes every word. That's when I realized this wasn't just a misunderstanding. He was plotting something. My name is Simone Harris. I'm 33 years old, and up until a few months ago, I thought I had a steady life in Charlotte, North Carolina. I was married to Darius, who was 40. Folks always said he was dependable, ambitious, the kind of man any woman could count on. We had been together almost 10 years. To everyone on the outside, we looked like the perfect couple. Good jobs, no kids by choice, and a savings account most people our age only dreamed of. But none of that mattered the morning I logged into our joint bank account and saw that our vacation fund, the one we had been building for nearly 3 years, was short by $14,000. At first, I thought I made a mistake. I refreshed the screen again and again. Maybe I typed the wrong password. Maybe the system glitched. But when I pulled up the transaction history, my stomach sank. A large wire transfer. Not from me. My first thought was maybe Darius had moved it to another account. We had talked about investing, maybe even buying a rental home one day. But something felt wrong. That evening, I asked him gently, keeping my tone light, "Hey, did you move some money out of the travel fund?" His expression changed immediately. Not confusion. Not surprise. Just defensive. He told me his mother, Loretta, had urgent medical bills. Insurance wouldn't cover them, and he didn't want to burden me with the stress. He looked me right in the eyes and said, "It's serious, Simone. I had to help her." And for a moment, I believed him. Loretta had been in and out of hospitals before, not life-threatening, but enough that I could imagine it. I even offered to visit her, to show support. He rejected the idea quickly. "She's embarrassed. She doesn't want people seeing her right now." That should have been my warning sign. But I brushed it off. Who questions money spent on a sick mother? In hindsight, that moment, the way his voice tightened and his eyes narrowed, was the very first crack in the life I thought we'd built together. After that first missing $14,000, I tried to convince myself it was really for Loretta's health. I told myself the money was helping her, that Darius was just protecting me from stress. But every time I brought it up, his reaction was off. He grew short, irritated, almost angry that I would even ask. Soon, he stopped talking about money altogether. Even our little routines, like balancing the grocery budget or checking in every Sunday about our savings, suddenly disappeared. We had always kept a system. Each month, we'd both transfer a set amount into our joint account. That account handled the bills, savings, and extra projects like vacations or a future home. It worked perfectly for years. So why was that system suddenly being ignored? By the start of summer, the unease in my gut grew into full-blown dread. That's when I logged in and saw another massive dip, this time from the house fund. The money we'd been building for nearly 4 years. Almost $28,000, gone in one swoop. I sat there frozen, staring at the screen, my hands trembling. That wasn't a bank glitch. That wasn't a mistake. Someone had deliberately taken it. I walked into the living room where Darius sat watching TV, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I asked him straight out, "Where is the money going, Darius?" His reaction wasn't calm or reassuring. It was explosive. He jumped to anger, raising his voice, shouting, "How could you even ask me that? Do you want my mother to die?" He threw guilt at me like a weapon. And it worked. I froze. I felt ashamed for doubting him, ashamed for making it seem like I cared more about the money than his mother's life. So I stayed quiet. But that night, when he fell asleep, I opened my laptop and pulled up our transaction history again. I combed through every payment, every wire transfer. And then I saw something that made my stomach twist. The money wasn't going to Loretta. It was being transferred into an account I didn't recognize. No name attached. Just numbers. I copied the history, took screenshots, and saved everything. Because deep down, I knew the truth. Something was very, very wrong. The next morning, I asked him again, this time firmer. Why is the money going into this account, not to your mom? Without hesitation, he said, that's my cousin's account. Terence is managing all of mom's payments. And that's when I felt the second crack. Because Darius hadn't spoken to Terence in more than 5 years. A huge family fallout over money that ended with Darius swearing he'd never trust him again. Now suddenly, this same cousin was handling all of Loretta's medical bills. I didn't buy it for a second. After Darius dropped the excuse about Terence managing the payments, I couldn't shake the feeling that every word out of his mouth was a lie. Terence. The same cousin he once called a leech. The same man he hadn't spoken to since that ugly family fallout? None of it made sense. So I started digging. Carefully. One afternoon, while Darius was out at a work meeting, I went to his desk. Something I never used to do, but by then, trust had already been shattered. I rifled through drawers and folders until I found something that made my chest tighten. A credit card statement for an account I didn't even know he had. It was maxed out. Over $18,000 in debt. But it wasn't the number that broke me. It was the purchases. Hotel stays at places we'd never visited. Expensive restaurants. Designer jewelry from stores I couldn't afford to step into. Who was he treating like royalty while I was clipping coupons at the grocery store? That same night, fate handed me the truth. Darius left his phone on the counter while he showered, and for the first time in our marriage, I opened it. At the top of his messages was a contact saved under Work Project, KP. Seemed harmless. Until I opened the thread. Thanks for the money, baby. Can't wait to see you Friday. Got something special planned for us. Then another. That fool buys every excuse. Just mention your mom and she hands over the money. You're brilliant, baby. That's why I love you. Your wife's so clueless. LOL. My ears rang. My hands shook. Attached to those messages were photos. Dozens of them. A young woman, barely in her 20s. Lingerie shots, selfies on the beach, champagne glasses in fancy hotel rooms. They had been living a double life behind my back for almost a year. They were planning vacations, talking about moving in together, even joking about buying a condo, with the very money Darius and I had been saving for our first home. That was the moment I stopped grieving for my marriage, and started plotting my response. I didn't confront him right away. I knew Darius too well. If I accused him, he'd spin more lies, maybe even move the money somewhere else. What I needed wasn't rage. I needed strategy. So I picked up the phone and called the one person he never expected me to, his mother, Loretta. I hadn't spoken to Loretta in months, but when she answered the phone, her voice was warm and cheerful. She had no idea her son had been using her name as a shield to drain nearly $60,000 from our accounts. I kept my tone calm. I told her I was planning a little anniversary surprise for Darius and wanted her to come visit. Without hesitation, she agreed. Of course, baby, I'd love that. It's been too long. That Friday, I took the day off work and drove to the station to pick her up. Darius wasn't due home until late afternoon, which gave us time. Back in my kitchen, I poured tea and laid out the evidence. Bank statements, screenshots, photos, everything. Loretta's hands trembled as she looked through them. Simone, she whispered, her voice cracking. I've never been sick. I never asked him for a dime. That's when I saw it. The same fire burning in her eyes that had been burning in mine. We waited together at the table, the paperwork stacked neatly in front of us. At exactly 4:15 p.m., Darius's car pulled into the driveway. He walked in, calling my name like nothing was wrong. But the moment he turned the corner and saw us sitting there together, his face drained of color. He nearly stumbled against the wall. Before he could speak, I smiled sweetly. Is your mom feeling any better? Was that last $3,000 enough for her treatments? Loretta stood, her voice cold and steady. Darius, What treatments? I haven't even had the flu. The silence that followed was heavy, like the whole house was holding its breath. Darius opened his mouth, closed it again, then stammered out excuses, stress, mistakes, pressure. He tried to claim the affair didn't mean anything, that he was going to end it, that it had all spiraled out of control. Loretta didn't flinch. A mistake, she snapped, is forgetting someone's birthday. This is betrayal. This is fraud. He turned to me then, desperate, his eyes wet. Simone, please, I didn't know how to stop. Just give me a chance to fix this. I cut him off. You had choices. You made this one. And now you'll live with it. From under the table, I pulled out a small duffel bag I had packed earlier. His clothes, phone charger, toothbrush. Then I handed him a folded note. I've already called Terence. You can stay with him. He begged. He cried. But I didn't say another word. Silence was my last piece of power. When he finally walked out, I locked the door, reset the security codes, froze the accounts, and the next morning, I called a divorce lawyer. But I had no idea. The worst was still ahead. For a moment, I thought sending Darius away was the end of it. But instead, it was only the beginning. Days later, I came home to chaos. My jewelry box emptied. The safe forced open. Important documents gone, birth certificates, deed copies, even my grandmother's wedding ring. I filed a police report immediately, and my lawyer rushed to put an emergency freeze on the rest of our assets. But Darius didn't stop. Next, he showed up at my family's cabin, my childhood sanctuary. When I arrived there later, I found wine bottles scattered across the porch, lingerie tossed carelessly inside, and renovation sketches with another woman's name scribbled on them. He had brought her there. Soon after, that woman, young, naive, sent me a message online. She claimed she hadn't known he was married. She even mailed back a pair of earrings he'd stolen from me, writing, "I didn't know these weren't his to give." By the end of that week, I'd lost not just money, but memories, heirlooms, and the life I thought was mine. And then the threats began. Messages from strange numbers, one moment apologetic, the next full of rage. The most chilling one was a photo of my mother's ring captioned, "We need to talk about what happens next." Not long after, I got a call from my apartment building. Maintenance had gone in for a water leak and discovered my place destroyed. Furniture slashed. Paint poured across the walls. And in huge letters, "Stupid fool." That night, I checked into a hotel under another name. My lawyer and a detective helped me file for a restraining order and a rushed court hearing. But before that could happen, Darius tried one last move. He sent me an email, a picture of a storage unit key with the words, "I know everything, Simone." It wasn't my storage unit. It was my father's, the place he kept my late mother's jewelry and family records. By the time we arrived, police were already investigating. Darius had broken in, taken boxes of heirlooms, letters, and even property deeds. The next day, he demanded I meet him at a park by the lake. "Come alone at 2 p.m., or I start selling everything," he wrote. I went, but I wasn't alone. 2 undercover officers followed me. When he arrived, he looked thinner, twitchier, like a shadow of the man I had once known. He ranted about betrayal, about how I'd ruined his life. Then came his pitch. "Just give me $18,000 to start fresh, and I'll sign the divorce papers. I'll give it all back." I asked, "Where's my mom's ring, Darius?" He smirked. "Safe for now." I stood up. "You don't get to decide how this ends." That's when he snapped, grabbing my wrist. "Don't walk away from me again, Simone." But before I could even react, the officers moved in, pulling him back, reading his rights as they cuffed him. In his backpack, they found my ring, a notebook filled with my addresses, and copies of my bank records. He hadn't just been spiraling. He had been planning something far darker. In court, the judge granted me full protection, the divorce, and ownership of the cabin. Darius was sentenced to 16 months in jail, ordered to restitution, and placed on probation. I sold the house. I repaired the cabin. And I moved away to start fresh. I'll never recover every dollar, every heirloom, or the years I gave him. But I walked away with something he couldn't steal, myself. Some nights, I still wonder how long he had been plotting, how much I didn't see. But those questions don't matter anymore. Because I learned something stronger than betrayal. You can rebuild after destruction. You can heal after being broken. And you can walk away, even when it feels impossible. So if you take anything from my story, let it be this. Protect your peace, protect your future, and never ignore the cracks in a lie. Because survival isn't the end. Thriving is.